Judge.
So we're going to call our meeting to order today. If there's any TV cameras in here, they have to depart the premises. So I don't see any, but unless there's one hiding in the back there. Maybe before we get into our official business today, we can deal with the minutes of the steering committee. You haven't seen it yet? You want to wait for the end? Okay, well, we can do that, can we?
What?
Yeah, there's no fine print or anything in there, and we're all in agreement with it. So, okay.
Mr. Chair?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Paul Reed.
I have some business emanating from last week's meeting during our interviewing of Mr. Pelletier. And I'm wondering if now would be the time to pursue that business or at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, could we do, maybe we could handle that at the end of the day's meeting,
sure.
Business as well.
Thank you.
And, okay, pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, Chapter 9, Pension and Insurance Administration, Royal Canadian Mounted Police of November 2006, report of the Auditor General, we're going to be pursuing our hearings on that matter, and basically the thrust of what we're looking at today is is questions and issues surrounding the access to information questions, and I think the witnesses are people that are all privy to that file. Normally we allow witnesses to make statements to start the proceedings. I welcome all the witnesses here today. If some of you have been here before and have made, we have to swear them in first. So we'll let the clerk swear the witnesses in first. So if there's anybody that has opening statements to make, maybe just put up your hand so I can be aware of who they are. Okay.
Un ou l'autre? You can go ahead. Yes, my name is Michel Joyal. Et je jure de dire dans mon témoignage.
I swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
I, Keith S. Brooks, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
I, Ian Cowan, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
I, Louis Alberti, do swear that the evidence I shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I, Paul Gauvin, do swear that the evidence I shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I, Christian Picard, swear that the evidence I shall give in my testimony shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I, Pierre Lavoie, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Paul McConnell, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Okay, Superintendent Picard, go ahead with your opening statement. We generally try to limit them to no more than 5 minutes, so.
Oui, ça ne devrait pas durer 5 minutes, Monsieur le Président.
It will not be 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman. My name is Christian Picard. I'm a member of the RCMP since 1972. I have nearly 34 years of service. In April of 2000, from April 2000 to May 2005, I worked for Access to Information with the RCMP. From May 2005 to May 2006, I was the Chief of Staff in the Ivory Coast. I represented Canada and the RCMP in that country. From August 2006 to October 2006, I worked as officer representative for the Central Region, and from October 2006 to today, I've been on detachment with the Access to Information section. I wish to say that the position of Access to Information Coordinator is a position which within the RCMP or D&D or Foreign Affairs, it is a very difficult position to hold. We work with extremely significant and delicate files. Often the managers don't want to understand the act. They just want the information, and they want it, some of it blacked out. As for embarrassing information, there's no section in the act which allows me to exempt even embarrassing information. When I joined the RCMP, as with every member of the RCMP, I swore an oath. I swore to apply the law, and I also swore that I would uphold it every day. And frequently, I ask myself the question, if the RCMP does not uphold the Access to Information Act, who will do so? For 5 years, for the 5 years during my time with the RCMP, that's what I did. I upheld the law, and I respected the spirit of the Act. This means I fought epic battles against senior managers, and in a paramilitary organizations like the RCMP, it was not always easy. We want to protect the organization against itself, but often it's perceived as being disloyal. I can tell you that at the end, when I signed letters which I sent to the applicants, that I was ready to defend the letter and arguments in the letter up to the Supreme Court. And at the time, of course, I represented the Commissioner. Now I am ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Picard. I have Deputy Commissioner Govan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not going to take much time, but I wanted to correct, or not correct, but I wanted to give my impression on the meeting on July 4th, 2007, when you asked Mr. Krupe. When you said? June 4, 2007, sorry. When you, Mr. Chairman, asked Mr. Krupe a question regarding contracts, and his testimony was his officers, and he was referring to me, signed every procurement contract. You will recall that I told you we removed Mr. Krupe's signing authorities as a result of some of the things that he wanted to do. As a result of that, he went to Public Works. Once he took that step, it's with Public Works that signs the contracts and not the RCMP. So when he actually went to Public Works was signing the contracts. Therefore, the answer to Mr. Krupe's gave is misleading and incorrect. These contracts are Public Works contracts and therefore were not signed by my officers. That's it, sir.
And Michel Joyal?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Michel Joyal, I am now retired from the RCMP. I retired in rather last March. I was the deputy officer responsible for policy and programs within the Access to Information Directorate. And when Mr. Picard was gone, as coordinator, when he was absent, I usually assumed his roles and responsibilities. And I am ready to answer any questions you may have.
I assume, George, who's first on the list here? Okay. Okay, let's go at her, Boris.
Thank you, Chair. Monsieur Joel, a couple of years ago, while Mr. Picard was away on a training course, you were in charge of the ATIP branch, and there was an ATIP request from February 4th of 2004 for former Commissioner Zaccardelli's expense claims. Did Mr. Gauvin intervene and call you into a meeting regarding this matter?
The request in question dates February 2004, the 17th of February. That's the post date on the document. And it had to do with the expense accounts for Commissioner Zaccardelli for 2001, 2002, and 2003, including a detailed breakdown and the receipts therein. And at the request of Mr. Gauvin's office, yes, I attended the Commissioner's boardroom, 1200 Vanier Parkway, to discuss the disclosure.
Okay,
and basically, it was on the 2nd of May 2005. Superintendent Picard had already told me that basically everything was fine and I didn't need to review. The letter was signed by him and it was all set to be disclosed. And basically, we were just giving a couple of days to the minister's office so that they could go through. It was a document of about 1,000 pages.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Gauvin had made the request to meet. You met in the Commissioner's boardroom. Was there anyone else present?
Yes, there were about, I believe, 3 other individuals. Sitting on my right was Inspector Tim Cogan. There were also 2 other individuals. The names are on the email, but I could not recall their names today without referring to the email, because my main focus was on Mr. Gauvin.
Okay. Did Mr. Gauvin request that a general synopsis be sent out as opposed to the specific claims?
At the opening, I introduced myself to Mr. Gauvin. Mr. Gauvin introduced himself. I was the first one in the room. We sat down, and he handed over a synopsis, and he basically, those are the documents that will be going out. And I said, of course, and I put them on top of the pile, and I said they're going to be going out with the 1,000 pages.
Just for the sake of clarity, you're saying Mr. Gauvin provided an alternate report or synopsis that was to go out instead of the one that had been prepared in ATIP?
That's correct. When I put it on the pile, basically he said that the decision had been made, that it was a synopsis that was going to go out. And I asked him who had made the decision, and he told me that SEC had made the decision. And I inquired as to who in SEC. I wanted to have the names because I wanted to see if one of these individuals was on the delegation order from the minister, none of which were on the delegation order. So I said, of course, the decision has been made. It's been made by Superintendent Picard. The letter is signed and so set to go.
Okay, so SEC, just for clarity, is the Senior Executive Committee, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioners, and Assistant Commissioners.
That's it. At the time, he did not mention Commissioner Zaccardelli as he was outside of town. I believe he was in Regina at the time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Giel. Mr. Picard, you signed off on this ATIP request of about 1,000 pages. We've heard it referenced before in committee an $80 expense, for instance, of a shot of cognac. Were there, I guess, were there expenses there of that sort that would have raised the average Canadian's eyebrows?
Well, I had reviewed all the documents, and it had been sent to the Commissioner's office as well. And obviously, going through the document, there was only one issue that could have some concern, was that shot of cognac for $80. But at the time, the Commissioner's office seemed comfortable with it. Maybe he had an explanation for it. So obviously, I was prepared to release that information to the public.
Okay. So what we're being told is that there was an ATIP request that came in for the Commissioner's expenses. It was processed. A fulsome document was put together. And then, Mr. Gauvin, you created a synopsis that you have instructed someone that wasn't under your chain of command. You instructed someone that it was going to be the synopsis that was going to go out as opposed to the report that had been provided. As controller of the RCMP, isn't it your job to make sure that there are no inappropriate expenses and not to cover them up afterwards?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm sure we had that meeting, but I don't remember it, and I got a pretty good memory. But anyways,
okay, just 1 second. So you don't remember a meeting? We've just heard a date, that it was in the Commissioner's office, that there were other people present. And Mr. Jouyal, you have said that there were emails that reference a couple other people that were present there as well?
Yes, sir. And the email was from Giselle Presland, and it was sent to Claude Caron, Tim Cogan, Paul Gauvin, Michel Jouyal, and Mike McDonald, and basically arranged at the request of Deputy Commissioner Gauvin, meeting time changed from 10:15 to 1:30.
Okay, so we've established that it actually took place, and there's a document, even though you don't remember it, but there is a document there. We would request, I'd like to request that synopsis document be tabled for the committee. Has that, just hearing that email, has that brought your memory back, Mr. Gauvin?
Well, if it came from my office, Mrs. Preslin is my secretary, so I'm sure it came from my office, yes. So there had to be a meeting, but I go to a lot of meetings, and I usually remember the people, but I don't remember this meeting. But anyways.
Well, that's pretty fascinating. Okay, well, in that case, we're not getting an answer from you. Your memory's blanked on that particular meeting. Pretty serious allegations, but I'd like to, especially considering the time limitations here, Mr. Jouyal, did one of Mr. Gauvin's executives call you soon after that meeting and suggest that where he worked previously in DFATE, a good ATIP office will do what the boss wants?
Well, you have to recall that at the end of the meeting, I told Mr. Gauvin that yes, as the ATIP coordinator, I had to look at all the, if there was sensitive information in the document, that I was ready to take a second look. However, he would have to put all of his recommendations in writing, or otherwise they'd be ignored. I guess I gave him 2 days to make these submissions by writing, or otherwise the package would be mailed as is. Then I received a call from his assistant, and I met with Mr. Claude Caron, I guess. The individual said that he was brand new to the RCMP, and he started making reference to a good ATIP shop, that basically where he was from, he had a good ATIP shop, which meant that the people did exactly what they were told to do. Well, I said, welcome to the RCMP. This is not how it goes here. I said, I've got full delegation, and that's it. So unless you've got documents in there that are very sensitive and you're ready to prove that to me and demonstrate in writing, otherwise they're going to go out.
Thank you very much. We'll turn over to Mr. Laforêt for 8 minutes. Not a second over.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Mr. Estabrooks, you have already appeared before the committee. We have in writing a copy of an email which you sent on April 13th, 2006 to Mr. Lavoie with regard to the RCMP pension file. In that email, you said that following a meeting which you had, I believe that these efforts are being made to delay making public the Ottawa Police Service's report to Mr. Girard. Were you referring to Mr. André Girard, who was the divisional rep?
Division C Division in Montreal.
C'est un des demandeurs.
He was one of the applicants for the two different pieces of information with regard to the delays. These applications had been made to the RCMP for two files in particular. So Mr. André Girard was one of two people who had asked for information, and at the time, you felt that there were deliberate delays in providing that information. André Girard was a divisional rep, and in fact, he also appeared before the committee as the former divisional rep. Now, do you have the impression, or at the time, did you think that that delay in providing the information to Mr. Girard, the delay was because he was a divisional rep and because he was a proponent of unionizing the RCMP? Do you believe this would explain the delay?
The association or unionizing would have anything to do with the delay. If that's what you're asking if it was in particular they would keep it away from Monsieur Girard because he was a proponent of having a union. I don't think that had anything to do with it. But we usually had an unwritten rule in the ATIP shop that members of the RCMP, we tried to move their files forward before other people, usually. I noticed this one seemed to take expensive time to process this one. And I think it just piqued my curiosity because he was a division rep more than I had nothing, that never crossed my mind that he was unionizing or anything to do with the union. I just looked at it as more, he was the equivalent of Mr. Lewis in Ottawa.
Est-ce que selon vous,
in your opinion, divisional reps, that is the representatives of various members throughout the country, do they often make access to information requests? So would these RCMP divisional reps make requests with regard to investigations which they don't have access to through internal procedures?
With the access to information shop, we did receive requests from DSSRs in the field because they could not receive the information through the other process, so they came through that way. It wasn't unusual for Monsieur Girard to come in, and same as Mr. Lewis.
Personne demande comme ça. Okay.
That they make a request. Mr. Alberti, you were asked for legal opinions on access to information requests. In the first case, I think it took 5 months. Does it frequently happen that an analysis take 5 months for an access to information request? I believe the regular delay is 60 days. Can you explain the 5 months? Well, before addressing the issue as to whether that was normal or not, since Mr. Girard's identity is known, well, his request was made on June 20th. And the file was brought to my attention on July 13th. It was already delayed at that point. There was also a presumption of delay, of refusal. I was not informed of that. The Access to Information Office did not, or rather had not even processed the file before October 8th, when it was informed by the Office of Information Commissioner that there was a complaint by Mr. Girard. So on October 8th, the Access to Information Office, and I'm very familiar with these facts because I've already made an Access to Information request myself for an activity screen. So on October 8th, Mr. Girard's request had not even been processed yet by the Access Information Office. On that date, we numbered it, we scanned it, and then we transferred it to 2 reviewers, including Mr. Estabrooks. On October 13th, when I was consulted, I was not even informed that there had been a delay already, and a notice of prorogation had not been sent, which must be done under the Act since it involved the RCMP. I know that allegations had been made that legal services, to use Mr. Estabrooks' language, we've been accused of stalling the process, but I can assure you that no such stalling ever happened. We never obstructed the file. Further, for us, at Legal Services, we are not aware of the applicant's name nor of the applicant's reasons. It is not unusual within the course of our work that we deal with many documents. The Access to Information Office is not my only client. I am responsible for litigation within the RCMP, which represents over 1,000 cases, representing over $1 billion. I am responsible for risk management, for legal services, for many areas. So this file in particular was not delayed inordinately. How long did it take you to process it when you received it? Well, I perused the file. I started consulting on it. During that period of time, I consulted my colleagues inside Legal Services, and as I was working on the case, not analyzing the file as perhaps Mr. Estabrooks had done, I have to pinpoint the facts. I have to keep in mind legal principles. I have to speak to the coordinator about legal principles. I did not have the role of an analyst, but as the file progressed through the system, new, important, and relevant facts surfaced. Therefore, ultimately, the nature of the document had changed. So it is not unusual for a file to go through this. We have all kinds of requests, and if you only want to refer to access, there were between 60 and 80 access to information files which had been referred to legal services. We had to ask all kinds of questions. Do we need to... There's a lot of paperwork involved in dealing with these requests. And I find it rather unfortunate that a former member of the RCMP used parliamentary immunity to make that kind of allegation, which caused prejudice to my reputation, to that of the Department of Justice.
Schedule here. Thank you very much, Mr. Laforêt.
C'est moi?
Yeah, you can start. The clock's ticking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gauvin, when you were here before, you were telling us about Mr. Croupe and how you found out that he wasn't doing things within the rules, and in fact, he was breaking the rules of contracting. And rather than firing him, you sent somebody over to keep an eye on him. And you were asked how much contracting authority Mr. Croupe had. You said $50,000 or $100,000. You weren't exactly sure. Do you still stand by the $50,000 or $100,000 limit?
No, after I checked, it was a lot less than that.
How much was it?
I think it's around, I forget, around 5,000 or 10,000.
You still don't know, eh?
Anything else had to go through the contracting shop.
Okay, so I'm really concerned about this, Mr. Gauvin, that have you ever fired anybody else for fraud or corruption in your career?
My whole career, yes.
You have, okay. Now, Mr. Croupe was messing around with the contracting. You were aware of that, and you were the CFO. Why didn't you fire him?
Well, I explained that before, sir.
No, you didn't explain. You said you sent somebody over to keep an eye on him. How did you send this guy over to keep an eye on him?
Well, first of all, I mentioned before that Mr. Krupe didn't work for me.
Well, we know that, but
He
you
worked
sent
for
somebody
HR.
over. You didn't fire him. You didn't send a report to somebody to say, fire the guy, he's corrupt. You said, I'm going to put somebody to watch over him. What kind of idea is this to put somebody to watch over somebody who's breaking the rules?
Well, about 2 points. First of all, he was breaking the rules.
Yeah.
And we wanted to stop him. So we put somebody in there. But he still insisted on doing what he wanted to do. So then we took his authority away. By doing that, his manager should have then taken the action that he should have taken. But I want to tell you that to fire somebody in the government, it's not that simple. You just don't say, I want to fire you.
So how many other people have you sent down to supervise those who are breaking the rules?
Not very many.
Any?
But no, not that I recall.
No. So this is the first one.
Yes.
You knew the guy was breaking the rules. You didn't even know how much contracting authority he had, according to your statement. You seem to have done no investigation whatsoever on this guy. He's spending RCMP money, which you're responsible for, and you seem to take it rather blithely and nonchalantly to send a guy to supervise. How many reports did you get on Mr. Krupe?
I think they did one report, but the issue
And
there
was the report good, bad, or indifferent?
the report is that he just wasn't getting any better.
And what did you do then?
But then we took his authority away.
You took his authority away. Did you report him to the union, to the human resources, to get rid of the guy?
Well, human resource, that's where he worked. By taking his authority away, obviously they should have taken
You mean
whatever
because he
action.
was in human resources, he was unremovable?
No, I don't. That was up to them to decide. But I can tell you that when we send people to Public Works or when people go to Public Works, we expect Public Works to do their
No,
job.
we're talking about Public Works. I'm talking about the RCMP. Mr. Krupe, on the payroll of the RCMP, spent $6 million, and he only had a $5,000 contracting limit. You were the CFO. You were in charge of the RCMP money, and you were not prepared to protect that money. You sent somebody down to keep an eye on him, to watch over him, and the report was he was still doing it, and you didn't take any further action. What was your motivation, Mr. Govan?
The motivation was that by going to Public Works is where we usually do a lot of contracting, and they're tough to work with. So we would have expected Public Works to do their job.
Did you
And
write
in
a
this
letter to
case-
Public Works?
In this case, they did not.
Did you write a letter to Public Works?
No, we had no reason to write a letter to Public Works. And then
This guy's breaking the rules. You send a guy down to supervise him. He's still breaking the rules. And you say because he's now dealing with Public Works, it's no longer your responsibility, and you don't write a letter to Public Works.
Because Public Works are very tough, and usually they do their due diligence, and
But you knew they
they follow the rules. In this case, they did not. And the problem there was that, you've only talked to one person in Public Works. Maybe you want to talk to some of the other people in CAC and why this did happen.
I looked at the audit of Public Works, Mr. Govan, and it was just a rat's nest of corruption between CAC and the NCPC and the people involved there. And you were in charge of the financial resources of the RCMP, and you knew it was going on and did nothing.
We did not know it was going on.
You did know.
When he went to Public Works, we expected Public Works to do their due diligence, as they usually do. In this case, there was something wrong in CAC.
And you did nothing.
Well, we didn't know. We only found out afterwards the same way everybody else did.
I just can't understand this, Mr. Govan. You said you knew he was breaking the rules. You obviously didn't even know what rules he was breaking because you didn't even know how much contracting authority he had. It seemed to not bother you to even find out. And you don't report the guy to have him removed from this office. You send somebody down to look after him. The report comes back, the guy is still at it, and now you're saying he's involved with Public Works. You don't involve Public Works. Write to them and say, watch this guy, he's doing some things that are not kosher, and you accept, this is perfectly acceptable. Now, I've asked you, I'm trying to find the motivations here, Mr. Govan, because this is not normal for a CFO. It is not normal. Now we had Mr. Joel telling us about these ATIPs. Now, you seem to be involved as a go-between here between the SEC, what does the SEC stand for?
Executive Committee.
Executive Committee, and the ATIPs people. Why did you get interjected in there and now you can't even remember?
You talking about ATIP? Yes.
I'm talking about this particular situation Mr. Joel was talking about.
I'd like to answer that, and I didn't get a chance before.
Well, briefly.
In ATIP, what happened there is that as I told you, we got this 2 feet of paper, which included claims plus a whole lot of receipts. In those receipts, it came from the Commissioner's office. And they asked me, is this what we do? I said, well, is it complete? And I would like to check them, and I would like to make sure that we don't leave any out.
But it was not your responsibility, Mr. Govan. These people work independently of the RCMP. They have their own delegated responsibilities,
Yes.
and you should not have been involved trying to massage this information.
First of all, I wasn't massaging information. Number 2 is, I was asked by the Commissioner's office, so what do you want me to tell them? No, we don't want to have anything to do with this? That's the first one. So all we wanted to do is to verify that there wasn't any that were missing. And if we had not done that, and you would have found
I'm quite sure you would have added them in too, Mr. Govan. Anyway, I want to ask Mr.
Yes, we wanted to make sure the report was complete and they were all there.
Yes, I'm sure.
There was never any intent of not.
I want to ask Mr. Picard a question. Mr. Picard, before you were in charge of ATIPs, were you doing any investigations into gifts from contractors and so on with the OPP investigation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was that a complete exoneration, or did you find things going wrong in that investigation?
It was a similar situation than this situation here. It was following cases where management refused to act on complaint of fraud and gifts and that type of thing.
No,
the OPP did the investigation. I did the internal investigation. Yeah. At the end of the internal investigation, member of the RCMP had breached the code of conduct.
Who?
I would say Mr. Gauvin.
He had breached the code of conduct.
Breached, yes. Yeah. He had received gifts from 3 different companies. One was SAP, the other one was 3M, the third one I can't remember. And he also had lied during the investigation.
He had lied during the investigation.
And it was reported in my report.
Okay. Now, there's a rumor that Mr. Gauvin was recommended that he be terminated. Is that correct? Are you any awareness of that?
Could you repeat your question, please?
It was a rumor that following that report, there was a recommendation Mr. Gauvin be terminated. Are you familiar with that?
No, sir.
Just a point of clarification before we leave this point. I think Mr. Krupe, in his testimony, said that before these things went off to Public Works and so on, there was a group within the RCMP of 5 or 6 signatures that had to go on to this proposal or contract or whatever it may be before it went off to Public Works. Mr. Gauvin, is that correct?
Yes, there was a number of signatures that were required within NCPC.
Okay. And would your signature be any of them?
No, sir.
Would there be anybody that reports to you that would have signed off on that? Okay.
May I come back? Can I make a point on the testimony that was just given? I mean, there was a real strong accusation here that I lied during those interviews. That's not true, sir. We had a disagreement, but it wasn't a lie. I mean, he's got his version, I have mine. And this is not fair for somebody to come here and just say that I lied during that investigation.
Right.
There was never anything proven on that. I had my point of view, he had his.
Right. I'd caution witnesses to refrain from making those types of accusations. Yes.
Mr. Picard is here in an RCMP uniform. He made that statement presumably in his position as an RCMP officer. I think he should be given the right to respond. That was his words, and therefore if he said that he felt that Mr. Gauvin lied, then let him give us some justification.
You're getting more time, but we'll let Mr. Picard respond to that.
Well, the answer is basically I asked Mr. Gauvin if one of the problems why he didn't act on the report that he received from Mr. Lincourt, Surintendant Lincourt at the time, was because he was new to the RCMP and because he was too busy to act on the report. He said no, under no consideration. It had nothing to do with that, and he didn't act. I went and asked him twice the same question on 2 different occasions. He didn't want to take any responsibility for what had happened, what had brought the criminal investigation onto the RCMP. And the reason was basically because he didn't act. What he should have done at that point was to called for internal investigation, called for a criminal investigation. He didn't act on it until such point when Mr. Rogerson came into a meeting and confronted him with this issue.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm sure that members will have an opportunity to pursue these areas further if they wish. Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your attendance here today. There was a memorandum written by Mr. Estabrooks to Mr. Lavoie that reads, and I'm quoting, "It is my opinion that Mr. Gauvin is in direct conflict of interest by having anything to do with the release of our proposed package, as he is a key player in the pension matter. Just the fact that he has access to the documents is a conflict and unethical. Therefore, I leave it in your hands to report this to the Ethics Commissioner ASAP," end quote. My intent is to come back to that, Chair. I wanted to make sure it hit the floor so I could reference it later, but I want to start by going back to Mr. Estabrooks and review again the day in question when Mr. Gauvin's assistant came down. We've been through it once or twice, but I'd like you quickly to go through again what happened that day when they came down and you looked in the file was missing. Could you just review that again for us, please?
I think just to make things clear,
yep,
that you're saying things were missing that day. Nothing went missing that day that I know of.
Okay.
What I was told, I was off that day. I'm back on contract. I was told by the senior NCO that had replaced me that the Inspector Cowan had arrived at approximately 5 o'clock. Before 5 o'clock, I think. 16. I have it written down. I can give you the exact time. I'm sure it's in the notes from before. And apparently had a piece of paper in his hand. This is what I was told.
Okay, who were you told this by? Who told you?
By Acting Sergeant Duchesne.
Sorry, who?
Lee Duchesne, who is the acting sergeant in my position.
Okay.
That he was asking for information for Mr. Gauvin. Mr. Gauvin needed information for his lawyer, I believe. And I think there was reference. I'd have to go back in the notes and make sure that it's correct. But I believe there was reference as to they were looking for numbers, file numbers, and they were also looking if I had anything that I had written about it on there, any allegations.
And
see, I wasn't there at the time.
Yes, so I'm going to go to someone who was. But just help me. When then did you come to believe that something was missing in these files? Reports that you had written.
That was before that. The dates on that were when Corporal Luc Poulin had asked me to take a look at the documents, and it was when I came back in. I'm trying to think. The dates would be also, I can look them up, give the exact dates, but it was prior to this, and the documents were missing prior to that.
Right.
But I should clarify, while we're all here, that through the Access to Information Commissioner's investigation, the other documents that were supposedly missing, we couldn't locate, have now been located and are on another file. So there's only one document missing now, and that's the handwritten A5. So I think that should be clarified.
The documents that have been found, are they the ones that we've already seen copies of because you kept copies, or are they new to us?
No, this is the information that they were looking for. There was a memo or an A5 written that was the same date, only a different month, the 13th, the day. But this was looked at by the ATI Commissioner, so you wouldn't have those here. I don't have a copy of it either, but I'm aware of it from being at a hearing with the ATI Commissioner that they did find that document and it was misfiled.
Okay.
Because there were numerous requests, as we know, on this. So there's only one missing, and that's so this is not like a truckload of files that have gone.
Okay. Maybe we can get our analysts then to check on that and see exactly what's been found, and is it something we've already seen? If not, is it pertinent to matters that we've been discussing here?
And I think you should be aware that the investigator's name is Robert Plant. So if you do go to ATI, because there has been a change, I think, in management there as well, that you go to ask for that investigator, he would have a copy.
Thank you. And it was Inspector Cohen, you were the staff person that went down that day to on the Friday?
Yes, I was.
Can you just tell me what happened that day?
At 4:30, I was asked by Mr. Gauvin to go down to try to attempt to find a series of captions, ATIP request captions, for 7 files that he was alleged to suppress according to a motion in this Public Accounts Committee. It was the same one on a motion of Boris Rudninsky. It was agreed that retired RCMP Staff Sergeant Keith Estabrook appear before the Public Accounts Committee and that he should bring along all relevant documents and files which indicate the suppression of access to information requested by Mr. Gauvin, and that retired Sergeant Keith Estabrook bring along with him the files with the following ATIP numbers involving pension fund investigation. With those same 7 files, I first called Eve, the Inspector OIC of, now Superintendent OIC of Access to Information Branch, to which I got an answering machine. Having never been to ATIP since I'm new to headquarters, I walked over to the location and I started dialing the wall phone list, and 5 minutes later a member who I knew was there from another committee. I explained to him what I was looking for. He said that shouldn't be a problem. Introduced me to Corporal Lee Duchance. I walked in. She was aware that that exact same request had been processed that day for our strategic branch and for others. She put me on the phone with Sergeant Hurry, who was her director, or supervisor, I guess. I spoke to him. He said he had actually processed that exact same request and that he did not have the authority to release it to me. I left. I was there for 10 minutes. I had no other intentions at that location, and it was very cordial at the time.
Any particular reason why you wouldn't just wait till the Monday?
Mr. Gauvin was appearing that same Monday before Public Accounts to potentially answer to those same allegations of suppression. It was, to me, it was the proper thing to do to expedite that request.
Okay. Mr. Picard, I realize you're not an ethics officer, but you deal with a lot of the issues of ethics around access to information. In your opinion, is there any problem with Mr. Gauvin? And I don't have an answer to this. I am seeking an answer. In your opinion, is there any problem with Mr. Gauvin trying to access those documents direct prior to a hearing on Monday, or does that make perfect sense to you from where you sit?
Well, there's nothing wrong by asking for it. Now the officer in charge has to make a decision if he wants to process the file before giving it to him, but nothing wrong by asking for it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
On that, I wasn't asking for the files. I was asking for the caption of the files, which are released weekly at headquarters to the deputy level. In other words, you have a file number, and a request would leave, leaving it out, contents of XYZ, file number 018585 regarding the incident that occurred on such a date. That's what I was looking for, the caption, so that Mr. Gauvin can at least understand or have some recollection of these files if it ever came up.
So why wouldn't they give it to you then?
They didn't give me an explanation. However,
wouldn't you be a little ticked off if normally it's information that's available? You want to make your boss happy. It's late on a Friday. Why are they being so difficult over something that, in your opinion, otherwise they should just give to you?
I don't know why. I can't answer that question.
Okay. So what'd you do about it?
I returned. I spoke to Mr. Gauvin. Mr. Gauvin I made a phone call for Mr. Gauvin for someone higher up in the chain of command.
Who, please?
That was Superintendent Tim Cogan, who was the acting director at the time. Mr. Cogan arrived at the office, spoke with Mr. Gauvin. I was not privy of that.
All this happened Friday afternoon.
Time here, Mr. Christopherson.
Aren't we always?
Mr. Resneski, 8 minutes.
Mr. Joyal, is that the same Mr. Cogan that attended the meeting that was an attempt to suppress the ATIP?
Yes, at the time, Mr. Cogan, I guess, was the director of PAID. He was acting on the absence of the director, who was Bernie Corrigan, so he was there as my boss.
I see. So Mr. Gauvin requested to have this meeting, took place in the Commissioner's boardroom. They had a document, a synopsis document, that they wanted you to replace the ATIP documents, the 1,000-page documents with. You spoke with him. Mind you, Mr. Gauvin has no recollection of this meeting. And afterwards, someone from Mr. Gauvin's office called you, chastised you for not helping the boss on this. I assume as a police officer you take notes during meetings. Did you take notes during that particular meeting?
Yes, basically on the
okay. If you could table, just because of the time limitations, if you could table those along with the emails that I asked you to table earlier. Thank you. Monsieur Picard, you were in charge of ATIP. You were away at that time. Were you fully aware, and did you support Mr. Joyal?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I was on a training process before going to Africa, Ivory Coast, and I came back to my office, and Sergeant Royal advised me that Mr. Gauvin had been involved in the file. So I decided to write an email to the commissioner because it was his expense account. I never wrote to the commissioner before on a release per se for this kind of situation, but because it was his expense account, he had to know what was going on. And I explained to him that obviously it was not appropriate, and that the thing that if we wouldn't release the document, it would probably be more damaging to him by trying to hide the information. At some point, we would have to release it anyhow.
Do you know if the document was ever released?
If the document was released, I was gone at that point.
Mr. Lavoie?
Yes, it was. I had just come in at the time, and Mr. Joyal had dealt with the actual release, and I signed off on it.
Okay. When you returned from your secondment to the Ivory Coast, now you've sent correspondence to the commissioner. You just mentioned it, and I'll ask you to table that email. Very concerned, I guess, about the attempt to interfere with the ATIP process by someone who's got the rank of a deputy commissioner. You've investigated, from what we've heard, Mr. Gauvin previously in a report. You wrote that he lied. You reported that he received benefits from several companies, 3M, and I can't remember the other ones that you mentioned. When you came back from your secondment from the Ivory Coast, I believe Assistant Commissioner Rogerson had a position open for you. Did you assume that position?
No, I did not. As a matter of fact, Mr. Rogerson told me that he had offered officer staffing of the RCMP to take me on board, but they turned him down. They said that they had something else for me, and when I came back, didn't have a job for me. I stayed home. My understanding is, obviously, it's either officer staffing, Mr. McDonnell, or Mrs. George, who made the decision.
Mrs. George, Mrs. Barb George?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Lavoie, earlier when you testified before us, you said that the ATIP request for the Ottawa police investigation, the second one, that Mr. McConnell from Mr. Gauvin's office showed up and was waving his finger at you. Can you just refresh us a little bit on what transpired there?
It was on the 5th of April. I had received a call from the Information Commissioner's office, Mr. Dan Dupuis to be more exact. He wanted to know who he was going to subpoena before them for Friday. And I told him that I would check and get back to him. So right away I sent an email to Mr. Corrigan, who was my boss. I sent an email a copy to Mr. Louis Alberti. I sent a copy to Mr. Gauvin, and I copied Mr. McConnell because I knew he monitored Mr. Gauvin's email. So if I didn't get one, I would get the other. And it wasn't 10 minutes later that Mr. McConnell came up and asked me, well, what's this? And well, I told him, I said, I have a memo here signed by Mr. Gauvin saying that the report is not to be released. And further, I asked you if you would, I said, if you have concerns, we will address your concerns, but just, tell me what they are. And he had responded to me that no, they had no concerns and that they would not participate in that, and their position was the report should not be released. So things were, he got a little excited, and I told him, I said, well, I said, if it's my authority all along, I said, remember that for the future, and I'll do my work from now on.
Okay. Thank you. So we now hear another attempt to interfere with the ATIP process, one with the expenses of the former commissioner and another one with the Ottawa police investigation. Mr. McConnell, we just heard reference to a memo from Mr. Gauvin instructing you. Is that in fact who you received your instructions from to interfere with the ATIP process?
I did not interfere with the ATIP process, sir.
How do we It appears that it's clear, a clear attempt to interfere with the release of ATIP documents.
The purpose of my visit down to Mr. Lavoie's office was to make sure that there was clarity of understanding between Mr. Lavoie and myself as to our roles within the ATIP process.
And what is your role in the ATIP process as staffer to Mr. Gauvin?
Mr. Gauvin was consulted. The process is that ATIP gathers information. They did a consultation. They asked for Deputy Gauvin's opinion on the release. That opinion was provided. Then it's back to ATIP as the final decision maker to determine what is released and what is not released.
Okay. Mr. Lavoie, just because of the time limitations, I'd like to move on. Mr. Lavoie, we previously heard that you removed the Ottawa Police Service report from the computer system, and you said that you removed it because it was your understanding that it was secret. And I have a copy of it here. We've all received copies of this. Perhaps I'll put it to Mr. Picard. How would we know whether or not this document is secret? I would assume you get it stamped, or I've seen documents where every page gets stamped. What is the process? How do you know that something is secret?
Yeah, usually there's a stamp with the classification on it, unless you advise some other way. I don't know, but usually there is a stamp on the document.
So normal procedure would be that it would be stamped that it's secret.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Lavoie, this document doesn't have any of that sort of notations on it. Mr. Estabrooks was surprised when you'd mentioned that it was secret. Who instructed you that it was secret, and consequently, I guess, it got removed off the computer systems?
I was quite convinced that it was secret. I had seen that somewhere. I mean, I wouldn't have done something. I wouldn't have done something unless I was quite sure. In fact, the only reason why that thing would have been removed was to keep it in hard copy instead of keeping it on a computerized system.
Thank you very much. Just a point of clarification on this secret with documents too. Maybe Mr. Picard could refresh us on. Somebody in this bureaucracy has got a stamp that can stamp a document secret, and then it doesn't get out on access for information. Now, who would be the people that have this power?
Usually it's the author of the document that classify the documents. The person who writes the document usually give it its classification until such time somebody reviews it and question it. But initially it's the writer.
Well, that'd be a pretty big loophole, wouldn't it, if the author could just classify his own document as secret and then you couldn't release it?
Well, the classification doesn't mean that it won't be released. Okay. You see, even if it's classified secret, the classification doesn't have necessarily an impact on the fact that you're going to release a document. Even if it's secret, we have to analyze the information in it to see if we can release it, not the classification.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Sweet, you're up for 8 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Alberti, Mr. Laforêt asked you a pretty direct question earlier, and I don't think I heard an answer. How long did it take you to examine this 51-page document?
The consultation was spread out over less than 5 months. In terms of working days, perhaps 20 weeks. But that's not the only thing I was working on. And perhaps I should point out that the work on that file was done in accordance with the procedures of the Department of Justice. I did the necessary consultations as opposed to other files. I tried to pinpoint facts with regard to this file, and I'm a little limited today because I'm bound.
An access to information request. You had already testified here that you knew it had already been delayed, so time was of the essence.
Non, le délai, monsieur. Non, je ne connaissais pas. Non, non.
I haven't finished my question, Mr. Alberti. Thanks.
Okay.
Is there not a standing rule, a maximum amount of time that you have in order to be able to respond when you're asked for a legal opinion?
Monsieur, dans le cas du retard auquel je vais faire.
Sir, to explain the delay, I said that the delay was, there was already a delay when I received the document. When I first received the file, I wasn't even told there was a delay.
Justice Department for when they're to respond to a request. That was my question.
Bertie, that seems to be a pretty straightforward question. Is there a standard rule or isn't there, and what is it?
Non. C'est selon le volume de travail.
No, it depends on the volume of work that we have. We have to prioritize files.
Now, I'm under the
Écoutez, je
impression
dois
that
vous
there's
dire, je viens d'entendre un commentaire, monsieur.
I've just heard Mr. Estabrook make a comment. When he gave us the file, he really didn't care because he told me he didn't care because he was retiring.
Le délai auquel vous faites allusion, c'est le délai.
The time frame you are referring to is the time frame the Access to Information Office must respect under the Act. If the file had been processed by Access to Information, we would have been told that a notice of prorogation had been sent to the applicant, and we probably would have looked more closely at the deadline. But certainly we did not try to hold up the process. I had treated this file, or processed this file, as part of my normal workload.
specifically was responsible for sending this document to Mr. Gauvin prior to the release of it?
Prior to the release, I would think that it was in my case. I requested be sent to them and to the CHRO to see if they had any last-minute comments. It was not for them to do the report or do our work. It was to identify any concerns that they may have before we actually went out with
that was your responsibility, though?
Yes. And
last time my colleague, Mr. Williams, was questioning you on that. At first you said that was normal. Then you mentioned it was unusual. Is that usual practice? As I recall, I didn't say it was normal. I did say it was unusual, but this particular case was very unusual also. But when we had a sensitive case, it wasn't out of the ordinary to send to the policy center for last-minute comments to be sure that there was nothing being released that shouldn't be released. Mr. Estabrook, there seems to be a lot of unusual things here, and I want to get your comment on it. Mr. Alberti was saying that it was delayed almost, I think if I go by the math of months, about 4 months. Then he handled it for another 5 months. You had mentioned earlier this one took an extensive amount of time. That's why it drew your attention to it. What else was atypical of this ATIP request in the process?
Atypical?
Yes, was not the norm.
Well, it was delayed 69 days before I received it, which is not usually that normal. It took 69 days before I looked at it. I looked at it, I believe, on October the 8th or something like that. The dates I can give you exactly. But I looked at it. It took me a day and a half to review it, and I think it was hand-delivered to Mr. Alberti on the 13th. It was delivered on the 13th because I have an email. Since I hand-delivered the proposed release package to Louis Alberti at 11 o'clock. This is the 13th. He advised me they will not be able to look at the package for at least 2 weeks because of his caseload. Probably the first week of November, he will contact you directly, and I had addressed that to Superintendent Lavoie. But no, it was delayed to start with.
Did you get a communication back within 2 weeks from Mr. Alberti's office?
I don't believe so. I talked to Louis in the hall a couple of times, and over the space of months. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
But no, I don't think there was a formal. I have nothing formal back. There's some notations on the ATIP flow screen, different dates. It was requested when would it be down, and I believe there was a conversation from a ATI investigator. The lady had phoned Mr. Alberti to question when the date was.
Okay. Mr. Gauvin, in July 2002, Sean DeFore, who worked in your department, submitted a report describing the contracting irregularities in the NCPC. Do you remember that?
He didn't submit a report. He wrote a memo for his own information. And what happened is, when I was interviewed by Mr. Frizzell, he misled me by telling me I had received this memo. I went back to my office and checked, and there was no such memo that had been received. So I checked it out. It was a memo that had been written for himself. It hadn't been filed. It was not dated, so it was never sent. So I wrote back to Sergeant Frizzell, and I told him that he had inadvertently misled me.
Now, are you in possession of that memo now?
Pardon?
Are you in possession of that memo now?
I'll find it and send it. Yes.
Okay. And could you give me roughly the nature of the memo? Did you take any action on this memo around these contracting irregularities?
No. I sent him the memo after he interviewed me during the investigation, so this was long after. But he misled me by telling me that I had received this memo. This was not a memo that had been sent.
You've mentioned that, but did you take any action on that memo?
Well, it was too late. The work had been done. This was after, during the OPP investigation, the OPS investigation. I also want to say that he came before the committee and misled the committee the same way he misled me by inferring that I had received that memo, and I never had received it.
Regardless of Mr. Frizzell's testimony, we've just had Mr. Picard testify regarding incidences with the OPP report, and we need to have that tabled as well. But now we get back to your knowledge of Mr. Krupe, and you said to my colleague that you did not warn Public Works and Government Services around his behavior, which I find extraordinary, that you knew that these practices were going on, and you didn't, and you also knew that CAC was an organization of which Mr. Krupe could go to in order to be able to accomplish this, and I'd just like to know why you did not give any kind of advance notice that there were some concerns around Mr. Krupe.
Well, first of all, we didn't know that CAC was doing what they were doing. CAC had been an organization had been there for a long time and were operating within the rules. And I also said a number of times that when you go to Public Works, we expect them to do their due diligence and do the contracts accordingly, and they usually do.
What's your point of order?
I just want to make sure that we get this document up until now hasn't been referenced.
Have we got your undertaking, Mr. Govan, to produce that document?
Yes, I will produce that document.
As soon as possible.
The memo, but as well, Mr. Chairman, the OPP investigation that was referred to by Mr. Picard, if we could have that tabled as well.
Yeah. Would you be in possession of that document as well, Mr. Govan? Is there anybody here that would be in possession of it?
We had a number of memos going back and forth.
We'll have to put in a request, I think, to the commissioner to produce that document. I'm not sure anybody here has. And I see Mr. Aliberti has been very anxious to try to intervene here, and I'm sure it's germane to something that cropped up in the testimony here. So
I would like to come back to the issue of the delay. I think it's a little unfair to raise issues regarding the delays. I work under the client solicitor privilege rule, so I cannot talk about some exchanges I held with some of my clients. When I look at the activity screen, which was filled in by ATIP staff, I look at the facts. These are not facts or actions I was consulted on. When it says it sat in legal services, Mr. Estabrook simply wrote that in the file without consulting me. I did not necessarily have to negotiate with Mr. Estabrook, who was not my client.
You're in a solicitor-client matter on that. Who was the client?
Well, the client is the institution in this case.
Which institution?
Well, it's the RCMP, and the client would have been the person who had delegate authority by the minister, and the minister being the ministre de la Sécurité Publique, qui a délégué.
Minister of Public Safety, who delegated to the commissioner, who delegated to another one, and in fact, Mr. Pierre Lavoie had the delegated authority.
No. Monsieur Lavoie.
Well, if you've got a client, who's the person you're speaking to when you get...
Monsieur Lavoie. Dans ce cas ici, c'est mon interlocuteur.
In this case, it was Mr. Lavoie.
This is new territory, and I don't know if we've got legal counsel here, but I would just like to get a clearer sense of how this works. I mean, we all respect solicitor-client, and I don't think anybody wants to impinge on that. But when the client in question is the organization that's in front of this committee and the delegation is to an individual, and we're talking about their role as a representative of that individual, I'm wondering and asking if, like the Privacy Act and other acts, if they don't get set aside in many cases when you're in front of here. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, given the nature of that relationship, that it's the RCMP, and it's about what we're doing, does that still hold?
Is there any member of
Because I got to tell you, here's my concern. Here's my hypothetically, you could generate a conversation with somebody in your own legal department and suddenly get it declared client solicitor, and then you can have whatever conversation you want and put together whatever you want. And I'm not saying that happened here. I hope they understand. I'm not saying that happened, but in terms of our business. And we could never get at that. If every one of these folks had a discussion with the legal department about some aspect of this, that could get captured. So I, for one, would like a little bit of assistance separating out how that all works in terms of priority of rights, Chair.
Well, I might call in the assistance of some of my advisors here. I think the proper representative from the RCMP, they're the client, if that's the case, could waive the privilege, and you could find out what the nature of the opinion was and so on. I think we've done that before on this committee. I think we did it on the firearms issue, so but I'm not sure what. Mr. Lavoie, do you have the authority to waive the solicitor-client privilege?
I'm a retired member, sir.
Oh, okay. So.
And the commissioner, the acting commissioner, has sent out a memo in writing asking everyone to cooperate with any of these investigations. If it's not of a personal nature, it's not somebody's personal, private life business, then I think that we either need to find a way to cut through or it should be waived.
Yeah, I understand your point.
Thank you.
I take solicitor-client privilege very seriously, and I think the Supreme Court have spoken on this at great length and over the years, and it's not something that I'm just prepared to jump in and say, use our big hammer and say, get it waived. If we feel that way, and I take Mr. Christopherson's point very seriously, this is an incestuous circle, getting smaller and smaller circles all the time between RCMP investigating themselves and solicitors at the Department of Justice being involved and processing information, and then I understand the complexity, but I don't think I would like to support anything at this time without fully understanding it.
I think
a matter of personal privilege, given what we're talking about, I was not suggesting we use the hammer. Far from it. I was asking for a bit of an explanation as to how this relationship works vis-a-vis this committee and its rights. Right. That's all.
Perhaps.
Point. I found.
Is this a point of order, Mr. Williams?
Well, I hope so, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we'll hear what the point of order is.
Okay. Well, I found Mr. Govan's answer quite implausible when he was trying to tell us that because it was consulting out of Canada.
That sounds like a point of debate, Mr. Williams. We've got to move on.
I would just like to.
I think I'm going to rule it's a
we
point
are
of
here
debate.
to try and get the facts,
Yeah.
and we have been led around the mulberry bush by answers time and time again, and this investigation is going on. And I said, Mr. Govan's answer was quite implausible as a CFO of the RCMP, where RCMP money was being spent by Mr. Krupe, whom he knew he was exercising his authority illegally and improperly, and that he was signing contracts with CAC that he wouldn't feel is within his responsibility. He just sloughed it off. It wasn't within his responsibility to advise Public Works that something funny was going on. Mr. Govan, why didn't you do it?
Well, Mr. Williams, I'm going to rule that question out of order. It's a matter of debate and opinion. It's a good question, but it's not a procedural rule, and we're going to move to the next person
I
on
thought
the
we were
agenda.
here to get the facts.
I have made my ruling.
We're here to get the
Madam Scroll.
Well, I think Mr. Williams and I must have ESP because, I'm so tired of Mr. Krupe seeming to be able to get away with everything around here and get paid for 18 months to stay at home. And I go back to Mr. Govan with all due respect. You're a career person here. You've been around a long time. Why did you not? You didn't care what Krupe was doing, as long as it wasn't if you didn't have to sign off. You didn't care about it.
Well, that's not saying I didn't care is not exactly an analysis of the situation. I mean, we had this project to do. We had a lot of projects in the RCMP. He was particularly doing this project under the auspices of HR. There was 4 levels of supervision between Mr. Krupe and Mr. Ivanovich. And we also, and on top of that, basically we were relying on Public Works to do their job. And I think they were here and they explained it fully that the job was not done.
But with all due respect, Commissioner Govan, you weren't doing your job either. Why would you have to rely on them to do their job when you are the head of the Chief Financial Officer, Corporate Management and Controllership?
Because we stopped them on the contracting side. And we expected that Public Works would do their due diligence, and they usually do. In this case, something broke down. There was collusion between 2 departments, and when there is collusion, it's very difficult to police.
Going back to the issue about the criminal investigation, how many conversations did you have with Commissioner Zaccardelli on the whole issue of what was going on within the pension concerns?
When there's a criminal investigation, we have no discussions whatsoever. We're told not to participate, and we're told just to wait for the results of the investigation. We're interviewed, and in this one, over 200 people were interviewed, and then you wait for the report. And we can't discuss it.
I'm going to go back to Mr. Picard. You indicated earlier that Mr. Govan had 2 opportunities to set the record straight and didn't do either one of them.
Yes.
Things that he could have done. Would you elaborate a bit more on that, please?
Well, at this point, I would suggest that this report has been done like 5 years ago. I would suggest that I would like to have a look at the report to be more precise on this issue, because it was an issue of he was made aware of the incident, didn't act on it, and didn't do what was supposed to be done. And it created the OPP investigation. And he didn't want to take any responsibility on it. And the question was about that, about the fact that when he was aware and why he didn't do anything about it. And he denied, basically, this issue, saying that he did not delay it, but I would have to review the report.
Okay, that's fine, sir. We'll go back to Mr. Govan. There's a time limit, and the reason there was no ending up with no criminal investigation seems to be because the time period had lapsed. Were you aware of the fact that there was a time limit to that investigation going on?
No,
and why didn't you take some further action?
This is a different issue. This was the this is the Ottawa Police. This is the OPP investigation. And what happened there is that when I went to work for the RCMP, before I got there, this happened before I got there, there was an allegation that an individual had taken a trip with a car company, an automotive company. And I asked him twice, and he told me he hadn't. Now, Mr. Picard has maintained all the time that I should have taken action. I really didn't know what action to take. I mean, I had just joined the RCMP. Nobody sat down with me and said, this is how the thing works. I asked the individual twice. He told me no. And then, so there was a criminal investigation. During that investigation, it was a long time. And then they found that this individual indeed had taken this trip. After that, it was given to a deputy commissioner for the appropriate officer as to what happens with discipline. The appropriate officer was retiring at the time, and Mr. Picard and some other colleagues were deciding what to do with the discipline. And they did, and we took our medicine, and that was it. There was 19 people that were actually disciplined, what they call informal discipline. But Mr. Picard has maintained all the time, and he's still doing it today, that I should have taken action on that individual because I should have known, but I didn't know. I asked him twice, and he told me he hadn't taken a trip. In fact, he showed me a memo, which was signed by the Commissioner Murray, which said that basically he was this matter had been investigated and was complete.
And you didn't.
Thank you very much, Mr. Govan. If I can just pick up on a point that Mr. Williams raised, prerogative of the chair here, this whole outsourcing thing from day one. It seemed to me everyone on the committee would be of the view that the costs on this thing got out of hand, whether it's insurance or pension, and escalated quite dramatically all the ways through Morneau, Sabeco, and Great West Life, and then we got into this contracts with the other departments. So I guess the question I'd like to ask your point is the chief financial officer who's responsible for the control of the finances of the RCMP, why in the world wouldn't you get wired into this problem of these escalating costs and over budget and so on? Why wouldn't you be the natural person that these things would come to?
Well, I was one person, but as I explained
before... But you're
before,
the chief financial officer.
Yes, and I've heard you say that many times,
yeah,
and
right.
I've said before this committee that this was a project being done under HR. It wasn't my project. And second is that we watched this, and we knew the costs were going up, but they were all approved by the Treasury Board Secretariat. And there was two things we were trying to do at the same time. One of them was to implement Bill C-78, which was a new pension bill, and we had to produce financial statements, and the information had to be correct. So there was a lot of correction of information here. At the same time, there was some we wanted to do the outsourcing.
But I still got to ask you one question. If the money is being spent there's problems in HR with spending the money, and it's getting out of control, and you're the chief financial officer of the RCMP, do you not have some responsibility to find out what's going on in that department and bring about some accountability?
And we asked many questions. Okay. But if you look at the other two pension plans, that their cost is also going up. In fact, the public service pension plan went up 100% at the same time, okay. And the DND pension plan went up 143%. So a lot of that was really due to implementing Bill C-78 as opposed to outsourcing.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. And Mr. Lake, you're up for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. It's a complex web. Mr. Lavoie, you came highly recommended by Mr. Gauvin into your position, I believe, in the privacy office, right?
Yes.
How did you know him beforehand?
I was Director of Financial Policy in the in Corporate Management Controlship, and I was there for a year.
Okay, so you knew him for 1 year?
I knew him, but I was not reporting to him. I worked for somebody else.
But you knew him well enough that he highly recommended you for the position?
I would say yes.
Okay, now on March 21st, I'll stick with you now. You wrote this memo to Mr. Gauvin, basically asking his opinion or input or whatever the case you were asking, knowing that he was, would be fairly negatively impacted by the release of this information. Do you feel that you might have been in a conflict of interest at all?
No.
You said it was unusual to do this.
It was unusual. I mean, we didn't have members of that level being mentioned in reports every day. But there was nothing in that report that Mr. Gauvin couldn't have seen or couldn't see about what had occurred. And there would have had to been some special circumstances for us to withhold that report from him. And I wasn't made aware of any problem with respect to Mr. Gauvin having seen the report.
Okay, Mr. Picard, in your internal investigation, you recommended sanctions against senior members. Can you tell me specifically what sanctions you recommended for Mr. Gauvin?
Well, Mr. Gauvin got it wrong. My job, my responsibility at the time was to investigate and report the facts. I had nothing to do with the sanction. Deputy Commissioner Charbonneau was the appropriate officer at the time, and he's the one who decided on the sanction of the members and public servants.
And what were the sanctions recommended?
Some member received. I can't recall. I can't recall. I know some members were sanctioned with ethic courses, mm-hmm. And I know some member retired before being sanctioned or before facing the disciplinary process. I think I'm not sure for the rest.
Can you describe what happened to your career after you made the recommendation? Now you touched on it a little bit, sort of what happened in the timeline, but is there a direct negative relationship between the investigation and what happened to you afterwards?
Well,
we've heard that doesn't exist in the RCMP, but
well, there's no hard evidence on that, and I guess it'd be difficult for me to comment, but obviously I didn't go anywhere.
Right. Mr. Gauvin, you were the CFO of the organization, and I think if I heard you correctly, the quote directly was, "We did not know what was going on in regards to what was happening with Mr. Krupe," and you were the CFO. How can you explain that as a CFO that you wouldn't know what's going on? You're supposed to be tracking the money being spent in the organization. I mean, this man had $5,000 spending authority and spent $6 million. How could you possibly not know?
Well, I don't personally track every transaction. Second is that this was a project being done under HR. There was many other projects being done. We had the big CPIC project under CIO as an example. I don't track every one of those. On this one here, as it turned out, there was collusion with Public Works, and this is what happened.
But you were so busy going on that you kind of missed $6 million?
Well, I was pretty busy, but I would still track money, and we did ask a lot of questions, and we watched the other plans, and the other plans were going up because we were doing this cleanup. And also, all of this was approved with the Treasury Board Secretariat, the pension sector, and they knew a lot about pensions. They knew about Bill C-78, and they knew about the work that had to be done. And I can tell you that in the RCMP, there was a lot of work that had to be done, because under program review, those areas were decimated, and the records were bad. The people were not trained to what they should be doing. It wasn't a pretty picture.
Fair to say, in retrospect, that you dropped the ball?
I wouldn't say I dropped the ball.
No, it just $6 million.
Well, just about the project was completed. The project, there was a program valuation on that project. It's quite positive, very positive. The members are very happy with the outsourcing. About 95% are saying that the service is great. Public Works is now starting to do their own modernization, and they're talking about a $200 million bill. So I'd say within all of that it's it was reasonable.
Just going back to this, Mr. Alberti, I think, in response to David Sweet's question, is there a maximum amount of time for ATIP requests? Said no. And I'm curious to hear someone else's feedback on, I'm not an ATIP expert. What is Mr. Estabrooks maybe, what is the maximum amount of time under the legislation?
For access to information?
Yeah, for an access to information request.
I don't think there is a maximum, as long as there is in the respect that you have to notify. You have 30 days and you can extend it to 60, but on an access to information request, if you could extend it to 120 days, 300 days, whatever, as long as you notify the individual. That's under the Access to Information Act. That it's not under, that's nothing to do with legal law.
Thank you, Mr. Easton. Mr. Waugh.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Estabrooks, it's not quite clear. We met with the Access to Information Commissioners. What you're saying isn't quite accurate. We heard that many attempts were made to make this information public.
I was looking for the voice. I'm sorry.
Non, ce que je vous disais.
Well, what I was saying is that the Access to Information Commissioner told us at another committee, at the Access to Information Committee, is that he intervened many times, or at least his office did, so that this document could finally be made public. I have a question about these delays. Mr. Alberti, the way you answered, and I don't want to judge you, and I don't want an answer from you, I want an answer from Mr. Lavoie. It implies that you can't discuss delays because of solicitor-client privilege. I was serving the client was represented by Mr. Lavoie. Is that what you told us? You said I would rather not discuss the delays because I am bound by client solicitor privilege. My client was the RCMP, as represented by Mr. Lavoie. Is that what you said? I'm sorry, that's not quite correct. I said two things. As far as processing a file, there are two levels of processing, and we have to distinguish between them. There's the process, and what I would call is the substance, the content of a file. So in terms of the opinions I was giving, that is protected by solicitor-client privilege. I wanted to bring this sheet of paper to your attention. I'm sorry, I'll stop you right there. You've given me my answer. So what is protected by solicitor-client privilege is the legal opinion you give your client. Yes, and also issues surrounding the opinion. What I was to tell you is that there are annotations made by the client about the file. I can't control that wording. A client could put down anything he or she wants on this sheet. Maybe the analyst does so, but the information might not even be useful. Mr. Lavoie, I have a question for you, and I'm sure you can answer this. Did you ask counsel to delay the process? And did you ask him to delay giving you an opinion? No. Then why did you ask for a second opinion? I did not ask for a second opinion. The report came back on March 21st, and on the 22nd, my boss, Mr. Corrigan, picked up the report, and he sent it back for a second legal opinion. You're saying that your boss picked up the report and sent it back for a second opinion, knowing that it could take another 4 or 5 months? Is this normal? Well, we can't presume that the second time around it would take 4 or 5 months, because I released the report 3 weeks later. Why then would your boss, your supervisor, ask for a second legal opinion? Was he not happy with the first one? Well, I wasn't quite sure about the note that Mr. Gauvin sent. There was personal information in there which he did not want to have made public. I spoke with my boss, but I presume he wanted a legal opinion on this new information. Mr. Alberti, would you like to add something? Yes, I disagree with your premise. You said that a second legal opinion would lead to more delays. I believe that it had become clear that for the client, or rather, I would have had to work on this file on weekends and put other work aside. And in fact, what's being implied is that I should have done work which was the work of an analyst. Well, I still have a question. It's surprising, actually. You're very familiar with the Access to Information Act. Yes, you know that there are delays or deadlines, if you will, in the Act. 4 or 5 months, it's a long time. You have a client. Did you tell your client that this process was long? As with everyone else, since you work under the Act, you must respect the Act. Now, of course, there is no deadline imposed in the Act, but there are deadline guidelines. And did you tell your client that these delays had already been exceeded and that after 4 or 5 months, the Access to Information Commissioner would be asking himself questions? Wasn't it your job to tell your client this is going on for too long?
Je voudrais que vous répondiez, M. Alberti.
I'd like you to respond, Mr. Alberti. I think what you're looking for is the relationship I had with my client. As far as this particular file is concerned, I realize that you find it a bit unusual that I'm not talking about the various conversations I had with my client. But generally speaking, I can tell you that, yes, I did speak with the client with regard to this file. The client's concerns were were expressed, and I told him I wanted to process the file.
Lavoie?
Yes, sir. I would like to.
He wants to.
When I first testified last week, I gave an information sheet, and 80% of all access to information requests were provided out of time. And in fact, we were getting so many requests that we could not even go and request extensions beyond the 30 days. So we have to keep all of that in perspective. This file was no different than the hundreds of files that were also in deemed refusal position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lavoie, for that clarification. We'll turn 5 minutes for Mr. Sweet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Williams. I just have a question for Mr. Gauvin, and I won't mention your position again.
Deputy Commissioner.
Is there any department in the RCMP that would not respond to a memo from you if you requested, in fact, demanded financial information from the department?
I'm sorry.
Is there any department that would not be obligated to give you an answer to any question
no,
you would give?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Then what myself and my colleagues are having a hard time with is you have testified that you knew Mr. Krupe was doing things that were wrong, inappropriate with contracting. You were aware of that. And then you sent him to PWGSC with absolutely no heads up. I'm trying, and I'd like you to think about that if somebody did that directly into your department. But you left him in charge with a very sophisticated project that we've also heard plenty of testimony was very difficult to handle, this outsourcing of the pension fund, that escalated to 250% higher than what was originally given as a number for this transition. And I am finding it very difficult to believe why you would send someone, first off, and expect Public Works and Government Services to whip him into shape, that they didn't do their job. However, you have no responsibility if you just ship him off. And then you don't even send a memo. Just say, maybe I just better keep an eye on that department where we left this staff person, although they're now under the guise of PWGSC with contracting, and just make sure that that's going okay. Can you give me an answer to that?
Well, with hindsight, maybe we should have done that. However, I still maintain that there was 4 levels of supervision. Krupe was not working by himself. He had other people he was reporting to.
But you were the one that was aware of it.
They were aware too. There are 2,732 responsibility centers in the organization. And when we didn't send him. He went to Public Works. We expected them to do the job. And should we have given them a heads up? We didn't expect that they would collude and did what they did. Because also in CAC, it's an organization, and there's other people in that organization that should have been also managing the organization.
Well,
so somewhere, something went awry, and basically we ended up with a collusion case.
Mr. Williams.
Well, it just boggles my mind, Mr. Gauvin, that you can sit here as a Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP who you admit that whatever you ask, they will deliver to you, that as a CFO, you're responsible for all the financing and all the money under the RCMP budget. You knew that Krupe was messing up, and you didn't do anything about it other than supervise him. Now, the last time, Mr. Chairman, I saw this was in a sponsorship scandal where a middle-level manager could walk into a minister's office, walk into the chief of staff of the prime minister's office, and conduct all kinds of business. Now we have in the RCMP a middle-level manager, Mr. Krupe, who is in essence being protected by the CFO, who doesn't fire him, who doesn't alert Public Works to the fact that this guy is off the rails, and in collusion with the CSC, you do nothing, Mr. Gauvin, to uphold the responsibilities that you have, and I think that there's a serious dereliction of duty here on your part. What do you say?
Well, I totally disagree with you.
Well,
we have an audit department that did an audit, and when we found out what happened, we went back and we corrected it.
You knew before the audit, Mr. Gauvin, that this guy was off the rails, and you didn't report him to Human Resources. You didn't do a thing other than supervise him. Why were you protecting him?
Absolutely, we reported to Human Resources. We took his authority away, and that was a sign right there that something should have been done.
You said earlier on, in response to a comment by Mr. Superintendent Picard about this guy who took the trip in the cars or whatever the score may be. You said, as a new deputy commissioner, I didn't know what to do. Now, I would have thought that anybody who walks into being the deputy commissioner of the RCMP has some financial knowledge, and if somebody is messing around and taking some cash, you would do something. My God, we expect you to do something about it. So why didn't you do something about it?
Because there wasn't an official complaint that this individual had done what he did. There was some rumors and innuendos and a memo from a Mr. Lancourt, who was the internal auditor. Now,
but you knew about Krupe was messing up, and you knew that was official, and still you did nothing about it.
Just hold it for a minute. So this guy was the internal auditor. He had total access to the commissioner. He didn't do anything. He had been in the RCMP for a long time. He should have known a lot more about it than I did.
Thank you, Mr. Gauvin. I have a couple of points for clarification here before we move on to the next one. it seems to me there's a couple of committees here that have some responsibility for the outsourcing and some reporting, a pension advisory group and the NCPC. Were you a member of the pension advisory group?
Yes,
Mr.
I was.
Were you a member of the National Compensation
No, I wasn't.
group?
That's an organization within the RCMP. That's not a committee. That's a
Okay.
responsibility center within the RCMP.
Right, but the pension advisory group
Yes,
would,
I
would
was.
report to this group and give them advice, I assume.
No, they gave advice on benefits, but we did discuss outsourcing. There were 12 members on that group, including 3 staff relations officers who were excellent at the time. I suggested maybe you want to talk to them, and you didn't. On top of that, there was legal. There was somebody from OSFI.
Okay.
So it was a very...
Yeah, I'm not really interested at this point who's all on there, but you were a member of that
Yes.
group.
Yes,
so
I
you
was.
would have been aware of the financial overruns and the problems that were developing because you were on the advisory group that was dealing with this issue.
We knew it was costing more, and I explained that. We were also implementing Bill C-78. The records were in very poor shape. We had 40,000 files that had to be corrected.
And
that's where a lot of the money went.
And then on a related issue, there were monies moved out of the pension fund to help shore up the insurance thing at different stages. Being a member of the pension advisory group, you would have been aware of those issues as well.
Absolutely not, sir. That was done in total deceitful way, and we had to have an internal audit to bring that out. And as soon as we did, we took action on that part. I think if you look at the last meeting you had, I think you'll come to the conclusion that there was a lot of deceit between people here in that organization, including collusion.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I just want to move back to where I was. Not that this isn't an excellent line of questioning, but I want to finish off. We've already had testimony. This would be Mr. Estabrook saying in a A5, quote, "I can see no reason why it has taken months for Louis Alberti to give us a legal opinion. Are we assisting in some sort of cover-up?" And then later that day being, I think, the 14th of May, Superintendent Lavoie said, on March 21st when this was happening, and at that point I thought this was going to be something that down the road I was going to have to be able to explain in terms of what happened. From that point on, I made copious notes as to what transpired. I don't think there can be any doubt something's going on. Something in here is not right. Early on, you've got 2 key players identifying that in writing that they needed to cover their ass, quite frankly. So that's my ramp up to the quote I read earlier. I'm going to read it again. It's brief. In my opinion, this is from Mr. Estabrook, Mr. Govan is in direct conflict of interest by having anything to do with the release of our proposed package, as he is a key player in the pension matter. Just the fact that he has access to the documents is a conflict and unethical. Therefore, I leave it in your hands to report this to the Ethics Commissioner ASAP. Mr. Estabrooks, did you want to add anything at all or explain anything about that? Clearly, it's not your decision to make, but in your opinion, it was not appropriate that Mr. Govan was having involvement. And that's basically the essence of your statement to this committee, correct? Or actually, that was a memo that you sent to Mr. Lavoie. Is that accurate?
That was in a memo that was sent to Superintendent Lavoie. That is not the A5, the other one.
Right.
The other A5.
About the cover-up question was...
well, it's the word, too. It's the way it's being sort of changed. I said, are we? I didn't say we are. You know, like, you have to be careful how you word that.
Okay,
but,
well, I wasn't trying to play any games.
When I wrote the A5, when I wrote the A5, the handwritten one to Superintendent Lavoie,
right.
That was, I thought I was doing the proper thing because Superintendent Lavoie was my boss. My job as a senior NCO was to protect Superintendent Lavoie. I was hoping that when he read this, that it would sort of give him an idea of what could happen and that something would be done. This was no means to go after Superintendent Lavoie. It was my idea to assist, but maybe some people are taking it the wrong way.
Relationship's gotten a lot warmer over these years.
No, the relationship doesn't
add something to this conversation, did you, sir?
Is this my time?
Well, we'll keep it separate time. George, keep that time separate, but maybe it's pertinent.
You made a fairly serious allegation, by mentioning the word cover-up. If there was a cover-up, legal services had nothing to do with it. We had nothing to do with stalling tactics. In no way did the legal services participate directly or indirectly in stalling tactics or in a cover-up. Well, the point was made, the allegation was made.
Well, it's not an allegation, sir. I was just reading from testimony that's already been given here at the committee.
I wish to clarify the issue because I've been named as a member of legal services. At least I want to be able to defend myself.
Mr. Lavoie, when you received that, what did you do with it?
Which one?
The memo from Mr. Estabrooks where he's raising a concern that Mr. Govan is in a direct conflict of interest. What did you do
I've
with
already testified to the effect that I told him that I disagree with him. The issue was about the release of the report, and then I was basing my judgment on my policing and training background that this was not an ethical issue. It was an access to information and the release of the report issue, and I told him I would take care of it. So as a result, I went to see Mr. Estabrooks. I asked him to give me the file folder to keep track of all the steps I was going to follow to see that the report was being released.
So you disagreed with him? You didn't need to check with anybody as to whether this was appropriate? Everything here was in order?
I advised my immediate supervisor, Mr. Corrigan, that I was having difficulty with this report, and there was no way that I could justify not releasing the report. But no, this, in my mind, was an issue of the report being released, period.
Okay, I just want a clear answer, though. Do you believe that Mr. Estabrooks' concerns about Mr. Govan being in a conflict of interest have any merit?
At the time, I didn't think so.
Did you check with anybody?
No.
Any particular reason why you wouldn't check? Or just,
simply because based on my experience and the knowledge I had of some investigative, that I didn't think it was required.
Fair enough. Tell me about what happened in your office shortly after Mr. McDonald came into the office. You left a phone message. You received a phone message from Mr. McDonald, and there was a point where he came in the office and there was fingers waving and... this is your testimony, sir. It wasn't 10 minutes later that Mr. Govan's assistant was at my door and waving his finger at me, saying, "What's this?" That Mr. Govan had nothing to do with this decision, and it was my decision all along to make. What's going on there?
Sir, we're not talking about the same day here.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I know, but it's in reference to the same issue.
The memo was on the 21st. The discussion I had with Mr. McConnell was on the 5th of April.
Yep.
And that was the result of Mr. Dupuis from the Information Commissioner saying, okay, who needs a subpoena to come and explain what's happening with the report? I told Mr. Dupuis, hang on, I'll get back to you. That's when I sent an email to Mr. Corrigan, to Mr. Gauvin, to Mr. Alberti, with a copy to Mr. McConnell. And it wasn't 10 minutes later that Mr. McConnell came up and had the discussion that you referenced.
Okay, finish the story. What did you tell him ultimately?
Ultimately, I told him that if it was my decision to make, I will make my decision, and to remember that in the future.
Help me.
Office. In fact, I gave you about 40 seconds more just out of generosity. So now we have to move to Boris. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gauvin, who was the employee that you referenced? You asked twice about a benefit from a car company. What's the name of the employee?
I'm sorry.
Who was the employee that you referenced had received a benefit from a car company?
His name was Fred Dupuis.
Did you ever instruct Mr. Fred Dupuis to hire your son? And did he end up working for Mr. Fred Dupuis?
No, I never instructed him to hire my son. My son was hired through the Public Service Commission as any other employee would be hired.
Okay. Was he hired below Mr. Dupuis or under his authority?
He was hired within that area, but it was he was working in the central region at the time.
Okay. And were you worried about these allegations about Mr. Fred Dupuis?
Was I yes, very worried.
So you're worried about allegations that he was receiving benefits from an outside company the RCMP was contracting with. Were you worried that you were receiving benefits as well?
I wasn't receiving any benefits.
We've heard that the investigation found that there were 3 companies you received benefits from, 3M and a couple other companies. That didn't worry you? It worried you that perhaps someone else, but not yourself?
No, first of all, when at that time this was a habit in the RCMP.
Okay, just a yes or no. Did it worry you that you'd receive? Yes or no? Did it worry you?
I don't think you can say yes or no answer. One of those occasions, actually, one of those occasions, actually, I was asked to represent the RCMP and go donate a check for $6,000 and do a speech to the Canadian Cancer Society. At that time, they asked me to play with the president of the Canadian Cancer Society for the Ottawa region. I thought it was a social thing to do. After that, I got reprimanded for it.
Okay, well, I assume the 3M was a different set of circumstances. But talking about golf, now that you've mentioned golf, Mr. Gauvin, back to St. Andrews by the Sea and your chummy golf games with Mr. Krupe and Mr. Ivanovich. Mr. Krupe, who doesn't seem to just keeps on going there, doing his contracting with under your watch. You had committed to repaying the money that was inappropriately taken from the pension fund to pay for your golf games with Mr. Krupe. Has that been done finally?
First of all, I didn't have anything to do with 3M, so I never had anything to do with 3M. In terms of Algonquin, yes, what I've done is written every member who was there and asked them to remit.
Have you remitted?
Yes, I have remitted, and I've gotten at least 6 other people that have. And there are other letters still yet outstanding that they're remitting. And that money is being credited to the pension fund.
Now, I guess you had instructed Mr. Joyel to use a summary that I guess your employees had created to replace an ATIP request. That summary was generated out of your office?
Okay, I'm glad you gave me the opportunity. First of all, that request was outstanding for a long time. There is really nothing that we can do to stop the release of the commissioner's
No, but you tried to stop it,
No,
and you tried to replace
I did not try to stop it. You said that.
No, Mr. Joyel said it.
And I've written to Mr. Picard, and that was not truthful. What we tried to do...
Okay, well, hold on. You've written to Mr. Picard. No, Mr. Picard, you wrote to the former commissioner. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
But you got a response from Mr. Gauvin as a result of a letter to the former commissioner. Is that correct?
A result of an email, yes, sir.
That is correct. And what happened?
So you had a concern that there was a report that's being covered up. You sent those concerns through to the former commissioner, Zach Cardelli, and the very person that's attempting and generated a report to cover up an expense report contacts you? Is that what happened? Mr. Gauvin?
Can I reply to that?
Well, I'm asking Mr. Picard. So
yes,
Mr.
he responded because I didn't give him a copy of the email I sent to Commissioner Zaccardelli.
Okay.
If I can, may I say something here?
Yes.
What I saw is a memo that Mr. Picard had written to the commissioner saying that I didn't want this released. That was not true. And I wrote him back right away, and I said, look, if you use it by name in there, at least you could have given me a copy. But he didn't. But all we were trying to do is get something out quick, which was a summary, until we could check this pile of claims to make sure we hadn't left any out.
Well,
so even here, when we do something
check
right...
Mr. Joyel's records and his notes from that and I guess the correspondence that took place.
Question, Mr.
Yes. Mr. Lavoie replaces Mr. Picard. He comes highly recommended from Mr. Gauvin's office. He says himself that it was quite unusual for him to send the ATIP through to Mr. Gauvin for a heads up. Mr. Estabrooks, did you or Mr. Black feel that any of the portions removed from the Ottawa Police investigation regarding Mr. Gauvin were valid removals?
This is after it had been looked at? Is this after?
Yes.
Is this the final report you're talking about?
Yes.
This the final
yes.
request.
We know it's unusual, but that a person of interest in a criminal investigation would get to see it, and I'm not quite sure what finance has to do with ATIP, but so be it. What about the actual removals of the information from the report? Did you or Mr. Black feel that those were valid removals?
We discussed it, and we had Now, these are our opinions. We had concerns about Mr. Govan's name being removed for no obvious reason on the final report that went out in 2 or 3 places. We felt that it could have stayed in, that it wasn't personal information, but it had been removed.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Govan, you said that you did tell Human Resources about Mr. Krupe. I presume that was by letter or by email?
I think it was, well, when we took his authority away, I guess it probably was verbal. I don't.
Oh, so is this the rules, the RCMP? When somebody takes somebody's authority away from them, they're breaking all the rules, you just phone up the HR and say, by the way?
He couldn't contract anymore.
Did you do that by writing?
I'm not sure. I'd have to check with my people.
Okay, would you check and you table in this committee, 1, the removal of his contracting authority, and 2, you told us that you advised Human Resources. You're the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP. You're the CFO. The guy's ripping you off. And you just kind of nod over, pop over to the HR department and say, by the way, did you tell the Commissioner that you got a corrupt guy in the organization?
I didn't know we had a corrupt guy in the organization at that time.
Oh, but when you took Mr. Krupe's authority away from him because he wasn't doing
corrupt is a pretty strong word. Well, he's not the only individual that I found.
Did you tell the Commissioner?
At that time, probably not. But we do, just hold it for a minute, if you'll let me. We have a number of other people that break the contract authorities.
Oh, yeah? Okay,
and what
why don't you tell us all about them, too?
No, well, just hold it for a minute. I mean, we got 26,000.
Are they all under supervision,
hold
too?
It. We got 26,000 people in this organization.
On
any one day.
I'm sorry, Mr. Govan, but you're the Deputy Commissioner. I don't care if you've got 126,000 people.
If you'll permit
you are the Deputy in charge, and you carry the can.
And if you will permit me, I will continue.
Now, my question to you is, if you've got 20 people breaking the rules, are they under supervision? Are they being investigated? Are they being fired?
Okay, what we do is we have, first of all, we do a report for the Executive Committee every month. And what we do is the first time we tell them, look, if you do this again, we're going to take your authority away. If they do it a second time, they're given training.
Okay, that's fine, but you knew that Mr. Krupe continued on. And my question is, where's the letter?
We didn't know he was continuing
You
on.
said the supervisor gave you a report that he was still doing it.
No, the supervisor didn't give me the report. I said that.
I'm sorry,
I
Mr. Govan, but I don't think you should be in the job of the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP in charge of in charge of finances. Now, let me just answer this question. You were on the Pension Advisory Committee.
Yes.
Mr. Krupe was the manager of the Pension Department.
Yes.
You must have dealt with him directly.
At the Pension Advisory Committee, we would see him, but I didn't deal with him directly, no.
But you tried to lead us through the fact there was 4 levels of supervision between you and him, but you saw him directly. He reported directly to your committee.
No, he didn't report to our committee. He reported through HR.
He's the manager of the Pension Department, and you're on the Pension Advisory Committee, and he doesn't report to you?
He didn't report through the committee, no. He reported through the organization, which was HR.
Okay, a couple of more questions. One, you actually were golfing with Mr. Krupe, too, so you actually did know the guy.
No, that's false. I never did golf with Mr. Krupe.
Oh,
that's Mr. Wozniacki's allegation.
Then that's fine. Now, you also gave a check for $6,000 to charity. Was that RCMP money?
It was RCMP money that they had raised through a charity tournament, and they asked me to go out and present the check and do a speech to the Cancer Society at the same time.
So it wasn't RCMP money?
No, it was not.
This wasn't to do with the sponsorship scandal and the RCMP involvement in that, was it?
No, it had nothing to do with sponsorship work. It was money that had been used through various means for charity purposes.
Okay, now tell me, as the Deputy Commissioner of the RCMP and the Chief Financial Officer, and you find out that somebody's breaking the rules, would you write a letter to the Deputy Commissioner of Human Resources, Barbara George? Wouldn't you write to somebody in the Public Works, maybe the Minister or Deputy Minister of Public Works, saying, this guy is working with Consulting Audit Canada, make sure that he is not a problem because it's a problem with us. He's spending our money through CAC and we're not going to do anything about it. Don't you think that you have a dereliction of duty here, Mr. Govan?
Well, hindsight is 20/20.
No, I'm asking you today, you've got all the 20/20. Don't you think there's a dereliction of duty here?
No, I don't think so. I think I did my job and I did it well.
I'm sorry, but I do, Mr. Chairman. I still wonder why the commissioner who started an investigation on the other deputy commissioner hasn't started one on this one too, because there seems to be some serious questions with no answers as to why a middle-level bureaucrat by Mr. Krupe can spend $6 billion of the RCMP money and nobody has checked it out through the checks and balances to keep everybody honest, that he gets away with it. I can't believe, Mr. Govan, that you don't accept the responsibility.
Because I've explained it to you.
I can't believe you don't accept the responsibility.
It was an HR issue. He reported through HR, and there was 4 levels of supervision.
It was a money issue,
so you
and
want
that's
me,
your responsibility.
Basically what you're saying as the CFO, you want me to manage everybody in the organization?
You have checks and balances. Mr. Lavoie
Mr. Williams, we're very interested in your questions, but you're out of time. But thank you very much for your good questions, and thank you very much, witnesses, for your attendance today. We've got some other committee business. If you want to hang around and listen to it, you're welcome to it. If you want to leave, you're free to leave. So the first order of business I've got here is the minutes from our steering committee today. Maybe a little bit of a background on it. Last week we had minutes which were approved, which basically was to send a message to the House of Commons, to the Speaker, that we want to defend our parliamentary privilege. It looks like some things have crossed in the mail. The RCMP had written the Speaker, and the Speaker had sent it back to us for our thoughts. Basically, the motion we have, or the thing that was agreed to in our steering committee, was a reaffirmation of what we said last week, and that's about the gist of it all. So, yes.
I think this has to be dealt with as a formal motion. I agree with your assessment.
Right. It's on the agenda. It's on the agenda, Mr. Williams, for Wednesday in camera for a more thorough discussion and how we proceed with it. But the steering committee, the members on the steering committee felt quite strongly on the point, so we just thought it would be reflected in the minutes as our basic recommendation or position on the matter. But it will be on the agenda on Wednesday for a full discussion, and so save your powder for that day, Mr. Williams. And Mr. Polaroo, you had a... What?
Yes, something very curious.
Somebody to move that. But Boris, you're going to move the motion, weren't you?
All in agreement?
Yes. So...
All in agreement?
All in agreement? Good. With this?
Yeah.
For now.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but I can't agree with this, because it says, you said this is coming up for Wednesday for a discussion. It says right on here, we do present a report to the House in which it reaffirms its privileges and immunities. You're deciding now and discussing Wednesday?
Well, we're going to have it. We're going to have
the report on Wednesday.
Yeah, the report.
Okay, so let's just have the discussion on whether or not we are going to support this. No,
well, that's the way I understand it. But we've already sent that on last week's committee. We've already sent that to the House.
Okay, I'm confused here, Mr. Chairman. I am confused. A letter was received by the Speaker from the RCMP. The Speaker forwards it to the committee. The committee deal with it in the steering committee, and they say right here that we do present a report to the House in which it reaffirms its privileges and immunities, and if we concur in the report, the decision is made. So let's have the discussion before we make the decision.
So are you prepared just to have this thing tabled to Wednesday, and then we can hash it out then?
The 15th report, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll table it till Wednesday.
Okay. Good. Tabling motions there, so we'll deal with it on Wednesday. Mr. Pollard.
Something strange happened at the the meeting when we invited Mr. Pelletier to explain contradictory testimony between his appearance here and his appearance at Gomery. He spoke of a Privy Council request that he look into a donation to the Liberal Party of Canada. And this raised some serious alarm bells for me about why the Privy Council would have been involved in monitoring donations to the Liberal Party. In particular, he indicates that the Privy Council asked about a donation to the Liberal Party and actually knew the account number from whence that donation came. That's clearly in the testimony, and I'm just requesting that the chair write a letter to the current clerk of the Privy Council to inquire about why, in that instance, the Privy Council would have been cognizant of, or privy, no pun intended, to donations to a political party and account numbers from whence donations came. That would not be information typically in the hands of a nonpartisan public service department. And so I think a very simple letter from the chair, I think there won't be any problem getting unanimous consent for this, from the chair to the clerk of the Privy Council, just to ask what records there are of this information, and simply ask that there be an explanation from the bureaucrats at that department explaining why it was involved in such partisan activity. So I guess I'll just call for unanimous consent. I don't suspect
I would say
there'll be any
this is
problem.
in the nature of a motion. Do we have unanimous consent?
Just I want to speak to that.
Is there unanimous consent, though?
Well, just a second. Let me speak to
Well,
it first.
I'll let the Honourable Judy Sproul speak on that.
In that document that the clerk had prepared for us, that was one of the issues up for discussion. And we did discuss it. We did ask, someone specifically asked Mr. Peltier about that. Like, how did that happen? Because it's pretty irregular for someone in his position to end up knowing about that donation and then redirecting it. His answer at the time, I think, satisfied everybody. I just don't remember precisely what the answer was. So one of the things we might want to do is maybe we should get the blues of that meeting.
Oh.
I think he elaborated a bit more on it, but I don't recall exactly what it was that he had said.
Yeah. Mr. Laforêt.
La demande de M. Poilievre, M.
With regard to Mr. Poilievre's request, without judging the situation, I think it might be a better idea to wait until Wednesday to discuss that. I think it's already on the agenda, and that would give us time to look at any documents involved, testimony. We're not necessarily against your request, sir, but perhaps it might be a good idea to take a few days to think about it.
We've got this matter on the agenda, and Wednesday we can insert that as an item. It's in camera, and we could sort it out at that meeting. Mr. Christofferson?
On another matter, Chair. On another matter?
Okay.
Are you ready to
but
move
we're
on?
in agreement with this to bring it up on Wednesday. Good. Yeah.
To have been given?
Yes. Mr. Christofferson.
Just further to...
Just 1 second to finish this up. I don't understand why notice needed to be given. It's already on this proposed schedule. Follow up on discrepancies.
But he had Mr. Paulrue has a very specific request that we inquire into that matter.
I assume this was referring to that anyway.
But I'm going to, I've interpreted the group as accepting it as an agenda item to deal with when we're in that topic. So, Mr. Christofferson, it's your kick at the can.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I just wanted to ask if you and the staff would arrange either at the steering committee or if the broader committee is interested or in a report, but I would like some kind of a very short briefing on that issue of client-solicitor relationship. Just we may run into that again here where we're dealing with institutions that have large legal departments, and when they use that, I'd like to know where the legal lines are so that we don't make mistakes. But if you would have that followed up on, I'd appreciate it.
The legal counsel will be at our in-camera session on Wednesday, and I think you could probably get that
Well, then
an update on
the
that.
clerk would be good enough to give him a heads up and he could do a little prep work for that, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
And Boris.
Just trying to tie up a few loose ends. Mr. Krupe a number of times had said that he'd provide us with the reference letters that he received to and as a consequence of which he was hired by the Canadian Security Establishment. And since he wasn't providing it, I'd asked that we request D&D to pull that out of their file to see who it was that provided him with the references and why he was able to maintain his security status. He gave us a handwritten note, but that wasn't adequate. So I haven't seen anything come through unless something's arrived.
I think if he's going to be here tomorrow, so you could certainly pursue it. But my understanding is that he said that he gave references, like names of people, but...
No. There would have had to have been a document
well, he'll
with
be
references.
Here tomorrow.
But I had also at that time, when he just provided a handwritten note with 3 names, I had asked, okay, if Mr. Krupe no longer has that document, to request from D&D for that letter.
Details tomorrow, and then we can order him to do that.
The other one was Deputy Minister, I should say, Guimont, had undertaken at the last meeting to provide timelines for the various actions that were taken in a table that he'd listed, and my understanding was he'd be able to do that quite expeditiously. I haven't seen anything come through on that.
It hasn't happened. It's not complete yet.
And the final one, just tying up these loose ends, the Caseys, or Mrs. Casey, I should say, said that within 10 days she would provide the names of the 20 RCMP officials that were receiving hockey tickets from her company. The 10 days isn't up, but they will be pretty soon. So if we could follow up to make sure that the 10 days don't become 20, etc.
We'll make sure that George gets right after them if they haven't got that information here after 20 days. Right, George? Okay. And we have Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I'm getting back to this issue of the letter from the RCMP, Mr. Chairman, which I now have a chance to read. And I'm aghast. I mean, to say that I am aghast is an understatement. It says here from Chief Superintendent Bob Paulson, I quote, "I understand parliamentary privilege. I recognize the absolute nature and privilege, the crucial role it plays in the effective functioning of Parliament." Carrying on, Mr. Chairman, he goes on to say, "My investigation into, let me just finish. He goes on to say, "My investigation into the matter is nearing its conclusion. I have believed that Deputy Commissioner George's testimony before this committee was deliberately false." Now, Mr. Chairman, my point... Out of order. No, my point, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, you must listen. This is a point of order. My point. Well,
I don't see it as a point of order. It's a point of debate.
My point is quite clear. My point is quite clear. This guy, this chief superintendent, is completing an perhaps illegal investigation. He must be stopped now.
Can I deal with your point of order, Mr. Williams?
I'm asking you.
Just let me rule on it. The decision by this committee was we're going to deal with this issue you're talking about on Wednesday. It was in camera, unanimously agreed, and now you're dealing with something the committee unanimously decided by tabling this thing to Wednesday. So I'm ruling your point out of order, and I'm adjourning the meeting.
Hey, there you go, Chair.